10 o'clock. Good morning to you. Last Sunday of September. Glad everybody's here. Hope you had a good day so far. We're on page 7 of the book, talking about relatives, where we'll be this morning. And we have the word prayer. Wayne, would you lead some prayer? When it comes to the definition of what a relative is or who a relative is, it's someone that's connected by blood or by marriage. You can go either way. And sometimes individuals will say that, blood is thicker than water. Because often we'll take a stand with relatives when we wouldn't stand with anybody else. But it can be either way, connected by blood or connected by marriage. Some people have a lot of relatives. Some have a few. Some have relatives they have never met before. And then some have relatives that they see all the time. They surround them all the time. And of course, every family has a black sheep. Do we have any black sheep here today? You consider that. So every family has one or two or three, whatever it may be, but yet some look at themselves that way. Some family members can't get along with one another for various reasons. They just don't seem to hee-haw with one another. Sometimes you have a particular family member that sort of holds the family together, and then that individual may pass on, and then the family sort of becomes distant, and they all go their separate ways. You have some like that. Some individuals are into this ancestry stuff, genealogy. They like to start tracking their ancestors all the way back as far as they can, see where they come from. Sometimes you can find some very interesting characters in your genealogy, make you wonder just maybe this is why I do what I do, and who knows. But there are many different words that are used for the term relative. Sometimes they use the word clan. Sometimes ancestors or brood or descendants or kinfolk. All kind of words that people will use sometimes when it comes to substituting for the word relative. Question 1. What famous couple had a very good in-law relationship? Ruth, chapter 1, 16 and 17. This is speaking about Ruth and Naomi. But Ruth said, "Entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go. Wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. And where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me." So we know the story of Ruth and Naomi. They had a very close relationship with one another. And this was a mother-in-law, daughter-in-law relationship that they had. It makes it a lot easier in the family when the in-laws can all get together. When the son can get along with the mother-in-law and the father-in-law or the daughter the same way. If everybody can get along, it's going to make it a lot better relationship that can be had. But we know that not every mother-in-law likes the son-in-law. Not every father-in-law likes the son-in-law. And the same thing about maybe the wife. Not every mother-in-law likes the daughter that's married their son, and on it goes. But it would be good if those things could work out. It would be wonderful if they could, but it doesn't always work that way. When it comes to mother-in-law, there's a lot of mother-in-law jokes out there, a lot of them. I looked on the internet, it's just thousands of jokes are out there. Like one person said, behind every successful man stands a devoted wife and a surprised mother-in-law. Surprised. And one man said, I haven't spoken to my mother-in-law for over a year. I don't like to interrupt her. So all kind of, it's just on and on it goes. All these little comments about mother-in-laws. So if you got a good relationship with your in-laws, that's a good thing. If not, it's not a good thing. You won't try to have that. So Naomi and Ruth had a very, very close relationship. Question 2, what Old Testament man dealt deceitfully with his son-in-law? Genesis chapter 31 and verse 7. This is Laban when he had Jacob, and they didn't get along so well at the beginning. But it says, 31:7, yet your father has deceived me and changed my wages 10 times, but God will not allow him to hurt me. Well, even before this happened, you remember Jacob was in love with Laban's daughter, Rachel. And he loved Rachel. And he goes, can I marry Rachel? Sure you can. Little did he know the custom of the land that the older daughter had to be married first. So I don't know how this happens, but he marries the wrong one and didn't realize it till the next morning. And there he comes out of the tent. I married the wrong one. He married Leah. And the father knew this. The older one had to be married first. But he didn't tell Jacob this, and maybe just a way of getting rid of the older daughter. And he had to work another 7 years. But it wasn't a good relationship there. Even when it came time when Jacob wanted to leave and start his own family life, I should say. But the father-in-law didn't want it. But things worked out, and God blessed Jacob tremendously in his livestock that he had. But yet it got pretty rough start there. Pretty rough. But they worked it out. Number 3, how did God protect the interests of relatives in the law? Leviticus chapter 20. In chapter 20, there's a lot of laws concerning family and purity laws around all that. And here in chapter 20, verse 12, if a man lies with his daughter-in-law, both of them shall surely be put to death. They have committed perversion. Their blood shall be upon them. So the father-in-law, the father and daughter-in-law, no, that's not going to work. In verse 14, if a man marries a woman and her mother, how could that be? But yet it was taking place. It was taking place in these nations around Israel. They go into the promised land. They got all these idolatry nations, these heathen nations around them, and they're practicing these things. And God is saying to Israel, you don't do this. It's no good for them, and you're not going to do it. So he's given them these laws to keep them pure, to keep their relationships where they should be. So that's why he was given all these, and chapter 20 is full of stuff like this. But Israel was a different nation, and God gave them laws to follow. Don't go after these other nations. But eventually they did. As we know the story of Israel, they began to forsake God and go after these heathen nations and practice the things that they were practicing. And eventually God punished Israel, and eventually he punished Judah after that as well. So these laws are given to keep them pure. And you read these and we would think, man, wow, how could that happen? Well, we know it even happens even today in our country. Just some crazy things that take place. Nobody wants any restrictions. Let me do what I want to do. What people want today. Question 4. In the parable of the prodigal son, how did the father handle his younger son's restlessness? Luke 15:12, and the younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. So he divided to them his livelihood. So he let his son go. He took his part of the inheritance, gave it to his younger son. There was no reasoning with this young man. He was going to do this. I'm going to go into that faraway land. And he let him go. Let him go. Hard, I'm sure it's hard for him to do. And he wanted to tell him, you don't want to do this. And I'm sure he did, try to reason with him, but there was no reasoning. And sometimes with relatives, there's no reasoning. They're just not going to listen. So let him go. Next is Luke 15 verse 20, the return home. Then he arose and came to his father, but he was still a great way off. His father saw him and had compassion, and he ran and fell on his neck and kissed him. So the father was excited for his younger son to come back. He had to let him go, but yet when he returned, oh, how excited he was and grateful he was that his son returned. So again, he was willing to love him again. Well, he loved him when he left. He loved him when he was in that faraway country, and he loved him when he returned. His departing didn't cause his father to not love him. He loved him, I'm sure, more than it's like any parent would have a concern if a child, this way was to go off into such a place and not knowing really what's going on. And then, what about the elder son, pouting and insults? And I use chapter 15 and verse 30. But as soon as, this is the older son talking to his father, but as soon as this son of yours came, you who has devoured your livelihood with harlots, you killed the fatted calf for him. If you notice here, the older brother, he didn't have such a good relationship with the younger brother, because here he says to the father, your son. He didn't say, my brother. He could have. He could have said, but as soon as my brother came back, what did you do to him? What did you do for him? He didn't use that word. He says, this son of yours. He didn't really appreciate what his brother had done. And I'm sure there was strife in the home there. And the father didn't want that. But there probably was some strife between the older and the younger brother. And in that parable, the end of it is left open. There's nothing saying what happened between the older and the younger son. It sort of leaves it up to us, how we want to go with it. What would we do if we were in that situation? But there certainly was some strife there early when he returned home. Question 5, of all our human relations, who has the primary claim on our loyalty? Mark 10 and verse 7. For this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife. Outside of Christ, our spouses are to come before anyone else. Outside of Christ. Even our children. Now, we love our children, and we care for our children, take care of our children. But eventually, our children are going to grow up, and they're going to go off and start their own lives. And there will be husband and wife. If there's been no communication between them, it will be almost like strangers, pretty much. Too many times, the relationship is built around the children. They need to build their own relationship, and of course, have children be a part of that. But the spouses are to love each other more than anyone else. That's the one they're committed to and married to. But sometimes children will try to divide the parents. We know that. They can't let this happen. We know how children will go to one parent for something and they don't get the one answer they want. They go to another one, maybe to find an answer. And they'll try this division thing, but parents have got to be aware of that. It's not good for a married couple to, when they early get married, or really any time, when they get married, to move in with the parents. Sometimes finances and hardships, what it may be, that happens hopefully for a short period of time. But it's not good for a newlywed couple to have to live with either one of the parents in their home. They need their own home so they can learn each other and get their own routines down and have their arguments and disagreements and things like that. They need that time of growing together. So it's not a good thing when couples have to move in, younger couples have to move in with their parents for a period of time. But sometimes it happens, and you make the most of it. Question 6, what relationship must be sustained regardless of any others? Luke 14:26. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, and his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. Now the word hate here is not the word that we use for hate. The word means to love less. We are to love less our father and mother and wife and children, brothers and sisters, our children. God is to be our first and foremost love. And this is probably the most difficult passage in the Bible, at least I think, when we are to love the Lord more than anyone else in our family. And if one will love the Lord the way he should or she should, that's going to be great for that marriage to bond together. And a husband should want a wife that's going to put the Lord first. Man, that's what you want. A wife should want a husband that's going to put the Lord first. If he puts the Lord first, or she does, that's going to be great. He's going to do us what God said to do in that relationship. He's not going to think, well, I'm going to do this. I don't care what God says. I want to do this. And that's not going to go well with the marriage either. So it's a difficult passage because sometimes the husband or the wife will take sides with their parents when it comes to understanding truth, being obedient to truth. They'll go with the way of what the mom and dad may say. Difficult passage. Question 7, do we suffer for the sins that our relatives commit? Lamentations 5 and verse 7. Our fathers sinned and are no more, but we bear their iniquities. Then Ezekiel, we'll get to Ezekiel in a minute, but sometimes we can suffer. Children can suffer for the actions and consequences of their parents, and maybe even their relatives sometimes. They can suffer. Parents do things and it gets passed on to the children. That's not good. Children suffer. We see it all the time. But Ezekiel 18:20, the soul who sins shall die. The son shall not bear the guilt of the father, nor the father bear the guilt of the son. The righteous for the righteous shall be upon himself, and the wickedness of the wicked shall be upon himself. So even though we may suffer consequences for what our parents do, we're not held accountable for what our parents do. They're going to stand on their own, individuals before God. The children will stand on their own, and they're not going to bear the guilt or the sins of what their parents have done. On the same thought here in Ezekiel, neither will the righteousness work. Boy, I got godly parents. That's great. That's wonderful if you do. But you're not going to be judged according to their righteousness. You're going to be judged according to your righteousness. So he covers both situations here. Ezekiel does. You're going to stand on your own for good you have done and for what the wickedness you have done. If it's any what's there, held accountable for your own sins. So yes, we possibly could bear consequences, but we're not going to be held accountable for what takes place from our relatives. Question 8, what is the best rule to follow when dealing with kinfolk? Matthew 7:12. The golden rule. That whatever you want men to do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. Treat kinfolk the way that you want to be treated. And that can be, if you got some that are just very hard to deal with, that's going to be hard to do. You just may have to separate yourself from them so nothing gets worse said or done. But again, do your best. practice the golden rule to those hard to get along with relatives. Question 9, what is the reward for maintaining a proper relationship with kinfolks? I used John chapter 1, 40-42. He has Proverbs there, but I put John in. This is concerning Andrew and Peter. And one of the two who heard John speak and followed him was Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated the Christ. And he brought him to Jesus. Now when Jesus looked at him, he said, "You are Simon the son of Jonah. You shall be called Cephas," which is translated a stone. Andrew and Peter had such a good relationship between the two of them that when Andrew found the Lord, he immediately goes and tells his brother, Peter, "Look what I found. You need to come check this out as well." And as we know, they both became followers, disciples, eventually apostles. So a good relationship in a family can possibly lead to salvation of one or many of them. They're not saved. That can happen. But sometimes we neglect our relatives because it also can be a very difficult thing to teach your relatives. They pretty much know what you believe, you know what they believe, but yet it can happen. It certainly can happen when teaching others, our kinfolk, the truth. It can certainly happen. So let's not neglect them when it comes to teaching truth. Let's invite them. Let's do what we can to bring them around to seeing things the way Christ would have them to see them. Andrew did, and look what it did for Peter. Question 10, where can we all be assured that there will be no more in-law problems? Matthew 22, 29, and 30. And Jesus answered and said to them, "You are mistaken, not knowing the Scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection I neither marry nor are given in marriage, but are like angels of God in heaven." Well, since in heaven there's no marriage, you don't have to worry about in-laws. Good ones or bad ones. Don't have to worry about that. No marriage in heaven. Again, there can be many problems in a marriage due to the in-laws. But if handled properly, then a good relationship can develop. And you're certainly going to have a better home life if you can do that. All right, questions at the bottom. And we sort of looked at this one already. Why are there so many unkind jokes about in-laws? Well, sometimes in-laws want to run things. And sometimes they clash with one another, in-laws and the in-laws. They'll clash. They want your children to do one thing. And sometimes you'll have families that are totally different, the husbands and the wife's family. It may be you have a wife's family, and they have a big family, and they do everything together. Everything together. And then the husband here, maybe he had a smaller family, and they didn't. And he doesn't want to every holiday be at this family's place. He wants to have his own family together, and that can cause clashes sometimes. And you got these large families that sort of want to, again, we want to be part of this. And sometimes it doesn't work out. That's where the husband and wife got to work these things out. We're just not going to be a part of every little activity that takes place at your mom and dad's house. We'll have our own activity. And that can be cause a headache sometimes. Number 2, what causes us to have such trouble with our relatives? Well, we just see things different. Sometimes being a Christian can cause trouble. Say the wife, a Christian, and she converts her husband, and the in-laws don't like it. Just don't like it. I don't like the Church of Christ there. And here they go back and forth, and again, that can cause problems. So, religion, differences in religion can cause it. You may have one that's committed and one that's not. And hard for sometimes for the other one to understand that, the commitment. And then number 3, who has the responsibility to create goodwill between relatives? 2 verses here. Proverbs 16 and verse 7. When a man's ways please the Lord, he makes his enemies to be at peace with him. Do what is right. Do the right thing. Do it God's way. And hopefully, enemies, I guess that would include outside family members. We don't want to call them enemies, but they would be at peace with us because we're doing things God's way. It's never wrong to do the right thing. It's never wrong to follow God's way. And then Psalms 122 and verse 8, for the sake of my brethren and companions, I will say to you, peace be within you. So again, be a peaceful person. Blessed are the peacemakers, as Christ gave in the Beatitudes. Do our best to be at peace with people. And you may have to bite your tongue sometimes. And just keep your mouth shut. A good way to be at peace. Just let it go, and like water off a duck's back, let it go. And don't worry about it. In order to keep peace in the family. So relatives can be a problem. But don't have to be a problem. And I hope you got some good relatives that you can sort of get along with and enjoy while we have them. Any comments on relatives? Okay, about time for the bell.